The rain didn't wash away the humiliation. It only made the mascara sting her eyes as it ran down her cheeks. At 11:42 p.m., the heavy iron gates of the Cooper estate clicked shut behind her, a sound more final than a gunshot. She stood on the wet asphalt of the Pacific Coast Highway, shivering in a silk blouse that cost more than a Honda Civic, gripping the handle of a single battered Toomey carry-on. She had no black card, no driver, no dignity left to lose. They said she was a gold digger who flew too close to the sun. They said Paddy Cooper had plucked her from obscurity and thrown her back into the gutter where she belonged. They were wrong. She wasn't leaving because she was broken. She was leaving to sharpen her claws. 5 years later, she wouldn't just knock on that door. She would own the bank that held the mortgage on it. The silence in the master suite of the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic clinking of ice against crystal. Paddy Cooper stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the Manhattan skyline he believed he owned. He didn't turn around when Charlotte entered the room. He didn't have to. In his world, people waited for his attention. He did not offer it. Charlotte Keating smoothed the front of her dress, her fingers trembling slightly. It wasn't fear exactly. It was the adrenaline of a soldier stepping onto a minefield. On the mahogany desk between them lay a manila folder, the contents of which had shattered the illusion of the last 3 years. "You found it then?" Paddy said, his voice a low, cultured baritone that used to make her knees weak. Now it just sounded like grinding metal. He finally turned, sipping his Macallan 25. He looked impeccable, as always. Tailored Tom Ford suit, the silver at his temples perfectly groomed, the face of Fortune magazine's CEO of the year. "I wasn't looking for it," Charlotte replied, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "I was looking for my passport. I didn't know you kept a separate ledger for the shell companies in the Cayman Islands, or that Meridian Holdings was funneling money from the pension fund to cover your bad bets in lithium futures." Paddy laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Charlotte, darling, you were a barista when I found you. You were serving burnt coffee and dodging rent collectors. Do you really think you have the intellectual capacity to understand complex corporate hedging strategies?" "I understand theft, Paddy, and I understand that you forged my signature on the transfer documents. You put the shell companies in my name." The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Paddy set the glass down. The playful condescension vanished, replaced by the shark-like stare that had destroyed competitors for 2 decades. "It's an insurance policy," he said smoothly, walking toward her. "If things go south, the board needs a scapegoat. Who better than the trophy wife who supposedly got greedy? It fits the narrative, doesn't it?" Charlotte took a step back. "I'm going to the SEC. I'm going to the FBI." "No, you're not." He stopped inches from her, smelling of expensive scotch and cedarwood. "Because if you do, I release the photos from your brother's indiscretion last summer. The rehab stint, the gambling debts I paid off. I own him, Charlotte. Just like I own this apartment, the clothes on your back, and the narrative the press will run tomorrow." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He scribbled a number, tore it out, and let it flutter to the floor at her feet. $50,000, he said. "Consider it severance. Pack a bag. 1 bag. Leave the jewelry, the furs, the designer purses. Take what you came with. Get out of my city. If I see you in New York again, I won't just ruin your reputation. I will erase you." Charlotte looked down at the check. It was enough to survive for a year, maybe 2 if she was frugal. It was the easy way out. She bent down, picked up the check, and met his eyes. Slowly, deliberately, she tore it in half, then in quarters. She let the confetti fall onto the Persian rug. "I don't want your money, Paddy," she whispered. "And I don't want your name." She walked to the walk-in closet. She bypassed the rows of Birkin bags and the racks of Chanel. She went to the back, to a dusty corner, and pulled out the scratched grey carry-on suitcase she had brought with her from Ohio 3 years ago. She packed 2 pairs of jeans, 3 t-shirts, a blazer, her old laptop, and a framed photo of her late father. When she walked back into the bedroom, Paddy was back at the window, his back to her. He didn't think she was a threat. He thought she was a bug he had just crushed. "Goodbye, Paddy," she said. He didn't answer. She took the elevator down 80 floors. The doorman, a kind man named Henry, who usually smiled at her, looked away, ashamed. Paddy had already made the call. She was persona non grata. She walked out into the cold November rain. She had $62 in cash, a maxed-out credit card, and a suitcase. She hailed a yellow cab, not an Uber, because she knew Paddy tracked her phone. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked. Charlotte looked back at the towering monolith of glass and steel where her husband stood like a god. "LaGuardia," she said. "Take me as far away from here as a one-way ticket will get me." London was grey, wet, and indifferent to her suffering. It was perfect. Charlotte chose London, because Paddy's influence was weaker there. His empire, Meridian Holdings, was primarily North American and Asian-based. Europe was the one market he hadn't cracked, mostly due to the regulatory hostility of the British financial sector. She rented a room the size of a closet in a boarding house in Hackney. The wallpaper was peeling, and the radiator hissed and clanked all night like a dying animal. She went by Lottie King. It was close enough to her name to remember, but generic enough to vanish. The first 6 months were a brutal lesson in humility. She couldn't get a job in finance. Paddy had likely blacklisted her, and even if he hadn't, her resume now had a 3-year gap titled Housewife to a Billionaire. No serious firm would touch her. She worked 2 jobs. By day, she scrubbed floors in an office building in Canary Wharf, ironically, a building that housed Sterling and Cooper, a rival to Meridian. By night, she waited tables at a pub, frequented by tired bankers. Her hands, once manicured and soft, became calloused and red from bleach and dishwater. Her back ached constantly. But every night she opened her old laptop. She wasn't just surviving. She was studying. Paddy had been arrogant. He thought she was just a pretty face he'd found in a coffee shop. He didn't know that she had a degree in mathematics from a state university he'd probably never heard of. He didn't know that before she met him, she was building a proprietary algorithm for predicting market volatility based on social sentiment. She spent her nights tracking Meridian Holdings. She watched the stock price. She read every quarterly report. She watched Paddy's interviews on Bloomberg. He looked older, more stressed. The lithium deal was bleeding him dry, just as she predicted. One rainy Tuesday in March, nearly a year after she fled, Charlotte was mopping the marble floors of the Sterling and Cooper lobby. It was 9 p.m. Most of the staff had gone home, but the executive elevator pinged open. Out walked Arthur Penhaligon. Arthur was a legend. 70 years old, a bulldog of a man, and the chairman of Penhaligon Ventures. He was the old guard, ethics, handshakes, and brutal honesty. He was also the only man Paddy Cooper feared. Arthur was arguing loudly into a cell phone. "I don't care what the analytics say. The data is corrupted. If we buy into that tech startup, we're exposing ourselves to a 40% liability on the privacy lawsuits alone. Find me a hedge or you're fired." He hung up, threw the phone into his coat pocket, and slipped. It happened in slow motion. His polished Oxford shoe hit a wet patch of marble. Charlotte hadn't dried yet. He went down hard, his briefcase sliding across the floor. Charlotte dropped the mop and rushed over. "Mr. Penhaligon, don't move!" She knelt beside him. He was grimacing, clutching his hip. "Damn floors," he grunted, looking up at her. His eyes were piercing blue, sharp as tack. "You, help me up." "I shouldn't, sir. If you fractured your hip, I haven't fractured anything except my dignity. Get me up." She hesitated, then offered her arm. He was heavy, but she braced herself and hauled him to his feet. He dusted off his suit, wincing. "You're the night cleaner," he stated, looking at her uniform. "Yes, sir." "Well, You should use more wet floor signs. You could kill a man." He bent to pick up his briefcase, but the latch had busted open. Papers spilled everywhere. Charlotte immediately knelt to gather them. As she stacked the documents, her eyes scanned the top page. It was a risk assessment for an acquisition of a company called OmniStream. She paused. "You shouldn't buy OmniStream," she said, before she could stop herself. Arthur froze. He looked down at the cleaning lady holding his confidential documents. "Excuse me?" Charlotte knew this was it. She could hand him the papers, apologize, and go back to scrubbing toilets for the rest of her life, or she could jump. "OmniStream," she said, standing up and handing him the stack. "Their user growth is artificial. They're using bot farms in Southeast Asia to inflate their daily active users. Look at the server load variance between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Real users sleep, bots don't." Arthur stared at her. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. "And how?" Arthur said slowly. "Would a woman mopping my lobby know about server load variance?" Charlotte took a breath. She looked him in the eye. "Because I didn't always mop floors, and because I've been tracking OmniStream's API calls for 3 months on a laptop that runs on public Wi-Fi." Arthur studied her face. He saw the fatigue, the lack of makeup, the cheap uniform, but he also saw the intelligence burning in her eyes. "What's your name?" "Lottie." "King." Arthur narrowed his eyes. "You're lying. You have an American accent. You carry yourself like someone who knows how to wear silk, even though you're wearing polyester." "Who are you, really?" Charlotte looked around the empty lobby. She had nothing left to lose. "My name is Charlotte Keating. I used to be Charlotte Cooper. I was married to Paddy Cooper." Arthur's eyebrows shot up. "The Paddy Cooper? The shark who tried to hostile take over my firm in 2008? "The same. I left him a year ago with nothing. He thinks I'm dead or destitute. I prefer the latter for now." Arthur let out a low whistle. He limped over to a leather bench and sat down. "Paddy's wife, scrubbing my floors. That is... rich." He gestured to the spot next to him. "Sit down." "I have to finish the lobby, sir." "Screw the lobby. If you're right about OmniStream, you just saved me £200 million. If you're wrong, I'll have security throw you out." He pulled out an iPad from his bag. "Show me the variance." Charlotte sat. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was razor sharp. For 20 minutes, she walked the billionaire through the data she had memorized. She showed him the patterns, the mathematical impossibilities in the growth charts, the shell companies hiding the bot payments, a trick she learned from watching Paddy. When she finished, Arthur sat back, tapping his chin. "You're right," he muttered. My God, the analysts missed it. They were looking at the revenue, not the infrastructure. He turned to her. "Why are you here, Charlotte? Why not go back to the States? Why not sue him for half his fortune?" "He has leverage," she said quietly. "And I don't want his money. I want to build something that makes his empire look like a lemonade stand. And then I want to buy him out and fire him." Arthur Penhaligon threw his head back and laughed. It was a genuine, booming laugh that echoed off the marble walls. "I like you, Charlotte. I hate your ex-husband. He represents everything wrong with capitalism. He has no soul." Arthur stood up, wincing slightly. "You're done cleaning floors. Be at my office on the top floor tomorrow at 7 a.m. Bring your passport. I don't have a work visa for a corporate role." "I'm under the table. I'm Arthur Penhaligon. I own half the politicians in Westminster. You'll have a visa by lunch." He extended a hand. "Welcome to Penhaligon Ventures. Don't make me regret this." Charlotte shook his hand. Her grip was firm. "I won't, Arthur." 5 years later, the boardroom of Penhaligon Ventures in London overlooked the Thames. It was a sleek, glass-walled fortress of power. Charlotte Keating sat at the head of the table. She was unrecognizable from the woman shivering on the Pacific Coast Highway. She wore a bespoke white suit that screamed power. Her hair was cut into a sharp, asymmetrical bob. Her makeup was flawless armor. "The acquisition of Solaris tech is complete," Charlotte said, her voice commanding the attention of the 20 board members. "We've successfully integrated their battery technology into our automotive division. Our Q3 projections are up 18%. The board murmured approval. Charlotte Keating was the wunderkind of the London financial scene. In 4 years, she had risen from a special consultant to the CEO of the European division. Arthur had stepped back to chairman, giving her free rein. She was known as the Ice Queen in the press. Private, brilliant, and utterly ruthless when it came to efficiency. No one knew her background. Arthur had buried her history so deep that even MI6 would have trouble finding the connection to Paddy Cooper. After the meeting, Arthur waited for her in her office. He looked older now, frail, using a cane, but his eyes were still bright. "You crushed them, Charlie," he smiled. "They were easy targets, Arthur. They rely on old models." She poured him a tea. "Why are you here? You usually dial in from the estate on Tuesdays." Arthur's face grew serious. He placed a thick file on her desk. "It's time," he said. Charlotte froze. She didn't need to ask what it was. "Meridian Holdings." "They're bleeding," Arthur said. "Paddy's gamble on the South American mines failed. The environmental lawsuits are piling up. The SEC is sniffing around, but they can't find the smoking gun. The stock is down 60% year over year. The board is panicked. They're looking for a white knight to save the company from bankruptcy." Charlotte picked up the file. Her fingers traced the logo of the company that had once been her prison. "He'll never sell," she said. "Paddy would burn the company to the ground before he let an outsider take it." "He doesn't have a choice," Arthur countered. "The bank calls the shots now, and guess who just bought the majority of his debt?" Charlotte looked up, a slow smile spreading across her face. "You did?" "We did," Arthur corrected. "Penhaligon Ventures now owns the mortgage on Meridian Tower. We have the leverage to force a merger. I've set up a meeting in New York for Friday. The Meridian board, Paddy, and the prospective buyer." "He thinks he's meeting you?" "He thinks he's meeting a proxy. I told him I'm sending my CEO to handle the negotiations because I'm too old for transatlantic flights." Arthur leaned forward. "Are you ready to go back, Charlotte?" Charlotte stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the London skyline she had conquered. She remembered the check she tore up. She remembered the rain. She remembered the look in Paddy's eyes. Total dismissal. "I'm not just ready, Arthur," she said, turning back to him. "I've been packing for this trip for 5 years." The private jet touched down at Teterboro Airport at 4 p.m. The air in New York was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and exhaust fumes. Charlotte stepped onto the tarmac, her heels clicking on the metal stairs. She adjusted her sunglasses. She was back. This time, she wasn't taking a cab. A black Maybach was waiting. Her driver, a stoic man named Grant, held the door open. "The plaza, Mom?" "No, Grant. Take me to 432 Park Avenue first. I want to see something." She didn't go in. She just had the car idle across the street. She looked up at the penthouse. She wondered if he was up there, pacing, drinking his scotch, wondering how his empire was crumbling. "He's not there, you know," a voice came from her phone. She had Arthur on speaker. "I know," Charlotte said. "He's at the office, frantically trying to hide the assets before the merger meeting. The meeting is set for tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Meridian headquarters. The entire board will be there. Paddy is expecting an older British man named Nigel Thorne to represent us. He has no idea you exist." "Good. Let's keep it that way for 12 more hours." Charlotte spent the night at the plaza. She didn't sleep. She spent the hours reviewing the black ledger, the digital copy of the files she had memorized the night she left, the proof of the fraud. She hadn't used it 5 years ago because she would have been crushed. Now, she was the hammer. The next morning, she dressed in a suit of deep crimson. It was a power move. Red was aggressive. Red was war. She arrived at Meridian Tower at 9:55 a.m. The lobby had changed. It looked tired. The marble was dull. The receptionist looked stressed. "I'm here for the board meeting," Charlotte said, removing her sunglasses. "Name?" the receptionist asked, not looking up. "Charlotte Keating, CEO of Penhaligon Ventures." The receptionist paused, looked up, and blinked. "Oh, my apologies, Miss Keating. They were expecting a Mr. Thorne." "Plans change," Charlotte said icily. "Take me up." The elevator ride was the longest of her life. 60 floors. Every ding of the bell brought her closer to the past. When the doors opened, she was greeted by a nervous-looking junior executive. "Ms. Keating, right this way." He led her to the double oak doors of the boardroom. He pushed them open. The room was filled with 12 men in grey suits. At the head of the table sat Paddy Cooper. He looked terrible. His face was gaunt, his eyes rimmed with red. He was shouting at someone on his right, a woman. Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. The woman was Elena Rostova, Paddy's former chief financial officer, the woman who had helped him hide the money. "I don't care about the liquidity ratios, Elena. Fix it!" Paddy roared. "Gentlemen," Charlotte said from the doorway. Her voice projected clearly, cutting through the tension. The room went silent. 12 heads turned. Paddy Cooper froze. He slowly turned his head. For a moment, there was zero recognition. He saw a powerful woman in a red suit, a CEO, an adversary. Then he saw the eyes. His face went pale. The blood drained from his lips. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "Charlotte," he whispered. It was barely audible. "Hello, Paddy," she said, walking into the room and taking the empty seat at the opposite end of the table. She placed her briefcase on the mahogany surface. "I believe you're sitting in my chair." The board members looked between them, confused. "You know this woman, Mr. Cooper?" one board member asked. Paddy opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "We've met," Charlotte said, smiling, a cold, terrifying smile. "I'm Charlotte Keating. I represent Penhaligon Ventures. We hold your debt, and as of this morning, we are the majority shareholder of Meridian Holdings." "This is a joke," Paddy stammered, finding his voice. Arthur wouldn't send you. You're a nobody." "I'm the CEO of the company that owns you, Paddy. Sit down." The command was so sharp, so authoritative, that Paddy actually sat. "Now," Charlotte opened her briefcase. "We have a lot to discuss. Specifically, the discrepancies in the pension fund from 2019 to 2024. Elena Rostova gasped. She looked at Paddy. Panic flashed in her eyes. "You have no proof of anything," Paddy hissed, gripping the table. "You walked out of here 5 years ago because you couldn't hack the pressure. You're a bitter ex-wife trying to play dress-up." "Am I?" Charlotte pulled out a flash drive. "This drive contains the forensic accounting of the Ghost Protocol shell companies you set up in the Caymans. The ones you put in my name? I had them traced. And guess what? I found the transfer orders, signed by you and countersigned by Elena." The boardroom erupted in murmurs. "This meeting is over," Paddy shouted, slamming his hand down. "Security, get her out." "Security works for me now, Paddy," Charlotte said calm. "We bought the building management company last week." She stood up. "Gentlemen of the board, you have 2 choices. Option A, I release this data to the SESA and the DOJ immediately. Meridian stock goes to 0. You all face indictments for negligence. Paddy and Elena go to prison." She paused for effect. "Or option B, Paddy Cooper and Elena Rostova resign immediately. They surrender their stock options. I take over as interim CEO. We restructure, we pay back the pension fund, and we save the company." The board members looked at Paddy. They were sharks, too. They smelled blood. And Paddy was bleeding. "I move for a vote," the chairman of the board said, not looking at Paddy. "Motion to remove Paddy Cooper as CEO, effective immediately." "Seconded," said another member. "You can't do this to me," Paddy screamed. "I built this. I am Meridian." "All in favour?" Charlotte asked. 10 hands went up. Charlotte looked at Paddy. "It's unanimous. Pack your things, Paddy. 1 box. Leave the corporate laptop and the phone. Security will escort you out." Paddy stood there, shaking. He looked at Charlotte, searching for the girl he had bullied. He couldn't find her. "You planned this," he whispered. "For 5 years?" "Every single day," she replied. Paddy turned and walked out the door, a broken man. Charlotte let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for half a decade. She looked at Elena. "You're next," Charlotte said. "But first, we need to talk about where the rest of the bodies are buried." The victory champagne tasted like ash. It had been 3 months since the coup. Charlotte, now legally Ms. Keating again, sat in the corner office on the 81st floor of Meridian Tower. The view was spectacular. Central Park spread out like a green carpet, the Hudson River glistening in the distance, but the air inside was suffocating. She had done it. She had ousted Paddy, stabilized the stock, and purged the board of his cronies. The press called her the Iron Duchess of Wall Street. Forbes had her on the cover. But something was wrong. The text message from the unknown number kept haunting her. "Congratulations on the takeover. Now, let's discuss what you really owe me." She had traced the number to a burner phone, purchased in a bodega in Queens. Dead end. But the anomalies in the company servers were harder to ignore. Charlotte had spent the last week running a deep-dive audit on the company's legacy servers, the cold storage data that wasn't supposed to be touched. She expected to find remnants of Paddy's greed. Instead, she found a ghost. There were transactions dating back 20 years, long before Paddy became CEO. Massive capital influxes from shell companies in Estonia and Cyprus routed through Meridian's infrastructure into legitimate American real estate. It wasn't just fraud, it was laundering. Meridian Holdings wasn't a failed hedge fund. It was a washing machine for organized crime syndicates in Eastern Europe. And the digital signature authorizing the original architecture of this system wasn't Paddy's. It was signed with a cryptographic key belonging to Apex Ventures. Charlotte felt a cold sweat prickle her neck. Apex Ventures was the original parent company of Penhaligon Ventures. Arthur Penhaligon. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Arthur hadn't helped her out of the kindness of his heart. He hadn't mentored her because he saw potential. He had used her. Paddy had become a liability, too sloppy, too greedy, drawing too much attention from the SEC. Arthur needed to cut Paddy loose, but he couldn't do it himself without exposing the deeper rot. So he sent Charlotte, the scorned wife, the perfect, sympathetic face to clean house. She was the Trojan horse, but she wasn't the soldier inside. She was the distraction. While she was busy publicly firing Paddy and saving the company, Arthur's team in London had been quietly migrating the dirty assets into a new, untouchable cloud server. Her intercom buzzed. It was her assistant, a young, eager man named Leo. "Ms. Keating? Mr. Penhaligon is on the secure line. He says it's urgent." Charlotte stared at the phone. Her hand hovered over the receiver. She took a deep breath, composed her face into a mask of calm, and pressed the button. "Arthur," she said, her voice steady, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Charlotte, my dear." Arthur's voice was warm, grandfatherly. It made her skin crawl. "I'm looking at the quarterly reports. Stellar work. You've restored investor confidence faster than I anticipated." "I learned from the best," she said dryly. "Indeed. Now, I'm sending a team over from London tomorrow, a specialized audit team. They're going to help you scrub the legacy servers, just to ensure we're fully compliant with the new regulations. You can give them full administrative access." "That won't be necessary, Arthur. I've already begun the audit myself." There was a pause on the line, a silence that lasted 3 seconds too long. "Is that so?" Arthur's tone shifted. The warmth evaporated, replaced by the steel she had heard him use on competitors. Charlotte, you're a CEO, not an IT technician. Delegate it. My team arrives at 9 a.m. Do not touch those servers again. Are you threatening me, Arthur? I'm protecting you, he said softly. You have a nice life now, Charlotte. You have the penthouse, the reputation, the power. Don't dig for bones in a graveyard, or you might fall into an open grave yourself. The line went dead. Charlotte slammed the phone down. She grabbed her laptop and sprinted out of the office. She couldn't trust the network. She couldn't trust the building. She took the service elevator down to the garage, bypassed her driver, and hailed a cab on 57th Street. Where to? Just drive, she said, pulling out her burner phone. She dialed the only person who knew where the bodies were buried, because he had helped dig the holes. Hello? A voice answered, sounding rough, slurred by alcohol. Paddy, Charlotte said. It's me. Don't hang up. I know about Apex. I know about Arthur. Silence. Then a bitter laugh. Took you long enough, genius. I wondered when you'd figure out you were just the new puppet. I need to see you. Now. I have nothing to say to you. You took my company, my house, my life. I can give you something better, Paddy, Charlotte said, her eyes scanning the street for tailing cars. I can give you revenge. The diner was in Hell's Kitchen, a relic of a grittier New York with cracked vinyl booths and the smell of stale coffee. It was the last place anyone would look for the former king and current queen of Wall Street. Charlotte sat in the back booth, wearing a hoodie and dark glasses. When the door chimed, she tensed. Paddy Cooper walked in. He looked like a shadow of his former self. He had lost 20 pounds. His suit was off the rack, wrinkled. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a man who had lost a fight with a freight train. He slid into the booth opposite her, eyeing her with a mixture of hatred and curiosity. You look terrible, Charlotte said. And you look expensive, Paddy retorted, signaling the waitress for coffee. Black. Keep it coming. Arthur is sending a clean-up crew tomorrow, Charlotte said, leaning in. They're going to wipe the legacy servers. If they do that, the proof of the money laundering disappears, and they pin the remaining debt on me. I'll be the one going to prison this time. Paddy laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Irony is a cruel mistress, isn't she? Arthur played us both. He set me up with the lithium deal to fail, forced the liquidity crisis, and then sent you in to rescue the company while he moved the real assets, the dirty money, out the back door. I need the encryption key, Paddy, Charlotte said, urgency. I found the files, but they're locked. The ghost protocol partition. You have the other half of the key. Paddy shook his head. No way. That key is my life insurance. As long as I have it, Arthur won't kill me. If I give it to you, I'm dead. If you don't give it to me, Arthur wins, Charlotte hissed. He walks away with billions. You stay a broke, disgraced pariah. Is that what you want? To let the old man who ruined us both win? Paddy stared into his coffee cup. His hands were shaking slightly. Tremors of rage, not fear. What's in it for me? He asked. Immunity, Charlotte lied. She didn't have the power to grant it, but she had to sell it. We take this to the DOJ together. You turn state's witness. You claim coercion. Arthur goes down as the mastermind. You get a reduced sentence, maybe even probation, and I give you back the Hamptons house. Paddy looked up. His eyes narrowed. You'd give me the beach house? I hate the beach, she said. He studied her for a long moment. He saw the same fire in her eyes that had made him fall for her in that coffee shop years ago, before the money corrupted everything. The key isn't a password, Paddy said quietly. It's biometric, but not mine. Whose? Arthur's, Paddy whispered. But he's in London. No, Charlotte realized. He's not. If his team is arriving tomorrow at 9 a.m., he's already here. He wouldn't trust a clean-up this big to henchmen. He wants to see the servers wiped personally. He'll be at the penthouse, Paddy said. The one you kicked me out of. He kept a private suite there that even I couldn't access. The safe is in there. It has a retina scanner. But there's a bypass. A bypass? Arthur is paranoid. He built a physical failsafe, a hard drive hidden in the structure of the building itself. It mirrors every transaction in real time. It's in the server room on the 41st floor. But it's air-gapped. You can't hack it remotely. You have to physically plug in. The 41st floor is high security, Charlotte said. Biometric access only. My biometrics were wiped from the system, Paddy said. But I installed a back door in the HVAC system 3 years ago. When I was paranoid, the board was spying on me. There's a maintenance hatch in the sub-basement that leads to the ventilation shaft. Charlotte looked at her ex-husband. The man who had treated her like a doll was now suggesting a heist. You want us to crawl through air ducts? Do you want to go to jail, Lottie? He used her old nickname. It stung, but it worked. Fine, she said. Tonight. 2 a.m. The sub-basement of Meridian Tower smelled of damp concrete and ozone. Charlotte had traded her heels for sneakers and black tactical gear she'd bought at an Army-Navy surplus store in Chelsea. Paddy was beside her, holding a tablet and a flashlight. This is insane, Paddy muttered as he unscrewed the grate. I used to own this building. Now I'm breaking into it like a rat. Less talking, more climbing, Charlotte said. They shimmied up the narrow shaft. It was hot and claustrophobic. For 20 floors, the only sound was their breathing and the metallic clank of their movements. At the 40th floor, Paddy stopped. He peered through the vent slats. 2 guards, he whispered. New guys. Private military contractors. Arthur isn't taking chances. Charlotte looked. 2 men with earpieces and sidearms were standing by the server room door. Distraction, she whispered. I can trigger the fire suppression system on the 39th floor, Paddy said, tapping on his tablet. It'll cause a localized alarm. They'll have to investigate. Do it. A moment later, a siren blared, muted by the floor below. Alert! Fire detected on level 39. The guards looked at each other. One spoke into his radio. Checking it out. They both moved to the stairwell. Go! Paddy kicked the grate open. They dropped into the hallway. Paddy rushed to the server room door. He pulled a small device from his pocket, a keycard cloner he had kept from his CEO days. He held it to the reader. Beep. Access denied. Damn it, he cursed. They changed the encryption protocols. Move, Charlotte said. She pulled out a high-frequency jamming device she had borrowed from Arthur's security chief in London. She held it to the lock. The light flickered red, then green. The door clicked open. Where did you learn to do that? Paddy asked, wide-eyed. I didn't just mop floors in London, Paddy. I paid attention. They entered the server room. It was freezing, filled with the hum of supercomputers. Rows of blue lights blinked in the dark. Where is the failsafe? Charlotte asked. Row G, rack 4, bottom slot. They ran to the back. Paddy knelt and popped open a panel. There it was, a black, unassuming hard drive bolted to the frame. I need to decrypt it to copy it, Paddy said, plugging in his tablet. This will take 5 minutes. We don't have 5 minutes, Charlotte said, watching the door. The progress bar crawled. 10%, 20%. Suddenly the lights in the room turned on, blindingly bright. Impressive, a voice boomed over the intercom. Charlotte froze. She knew that voice. The door they had entered slammed shut. The electronic lock engaged with a heavy thud. Arthur, Charlotte whispered. Did you really think, Arthur's voice echoed through the server room, that I wouldn't anticipate the ventilation shaft? I designed this building, children. I know every bolt and rivet. Paddy stopped typing. He knows. Keep copying, Charlotte yelled. If we have the data, we have leverage. I'm cutting the oxygen to the room, Arthur said calmly. Halon gas release in T-minus 60 seconds. It's a fire suppression measure. Very efficient. Leaves no biological residue. A hiss started from the ceiling vents. He's going to kill us, Paddy said, panic rising in his voice. He's actually going to kill us. Copy the drive, Charlotte screamed. 40%. 50%. Charlotte looked around. Halon gas displaced oxygen. They would pass out in minutes, then suffocate. She scanned the room. There was no other exit, except... "The cooling pipes!" she shouted, pointing to a large industrial pipe running along the ceiling. "Liquid nitrogen cooling for the supercomputer. If we rupture that, the pressure will blow out the glass wall." "That glass is bulletproof," Paddy yelled. "And the drop is 40 floors. Not the exterior wall, the partition wall to the atrium." Charlotte grabbed a heavy fire extinguisher from the wall. She climbed up the server rack. "Charlotte, don't!" She swung the extinguisher with all her might, smashing the valve on the cooling pipe. A jet of freezing white gas exploded outward. The pressure in the room spiked instantly. The glass wall of the server room bowed, cracked, and then shattered outward into the building's central atrium. Fresh air rushed in. "The copy is done!" Paddy yelled, grabbing the drive. "Run!" They scrambled through the shattered glass, leaping onto the atrium balcony just as the server room filled with the suffocating halon gas. Alarms were blaring everywhere now. Real police sirens were wailing outside. "We have to get out," Paddy gasped. "No," Charlotte said, standing up and wiping blood from a cut on her cheek. She clutched the drive in Paddy's hand. "We're not running. The shareholders' meeting starts in 4 hours. We're going to the boardroom." The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel smelled of stale coffee, expensive perfume, and mounting anxiety. 500 of the world's most powerful shareholders, journalists and industry titans, sat in rows of velvet-covered chairs, their murmurs creating a low, nervous hum. They were waiting for an explanation. The stock of Meridian Holdings had been suspended from trading an hour ago, and rumors of a federal raid were spreading like wildfire on Twitter. On the raised stage, bathed in the warm, flattering glow of the spotlights, sat Arthur Penhaligon. He looked nothing like a man whose empire was crumbling. He looked like a grandfather, frail and deeply concerned, projecting an air of benevolent sorrow. He adjusted the microphone, his hand trembling just enough to elicit sympathy. "It is with a heavy heart," Arthur began, his voice wavering with practiced emotion, "that I must announce the findings of a massive internal investigation. We placed our trust in the wrong people. It appears that our newly appointed CEO, Ms. Charlotte Keating, has been colluding with her ex-husband to embezzle corporate funds on a scale that is frankly heartbreaking." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Pens scratched furiously against notepads. Flashbulbs popped in rapid succession. "The evidence is damning," Arthur continued, growing stronger, more righteous. "They have fled the jurisdiction, but I have been assured that federal authorities are in pursuit. In the meantime, I will be stepping out of retirement to ensure stability. We will be freezing all assets associated with Ms. Keating immediately." Boom. The double mahogany doors at the back of the ballroom didn't just open. They were kicked inward with such force that they slammed against the walls, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The room fell into a stunned silence. 500 heads turned in unison. Charlotte Keating stood in the doorway. She was unrecognizable from the polished executive who had graced the cover of Forbes a month ago. She was still wearing black tactical gear, her face smeared with soot, and a streak of dried blood on her cheek from the shattered glass of the server room. Beside her stood Paddy Cooper, clutching a battered laptop to his chest, breathing hard, his eyes wild but focused. They looked like soldiers walking out of a war zone, because they were. "I object to that motion," Charlotte's voice rang out, raw and commanding, amplified by the sheer acoustics of the ballroom. She didn't need a microphone. Her rage projected to the back of the room. Arthur stood up, knocking his chair over. For a split second, genuine fear flickered behind his eyes before the mask slammed back into place. "Security!" he bellowed, pointing a shaking finger at them. "These are the fugitives! Arrest them!" 4 private security guards, massive men in dark suits, moved to intercept them near the center aisle. "Stop right there!" Charlotte shouted. She didn't flinch. Instead, she raised her smartphone high in the air, the screen glowing. "We are currently live streaming to Facebook, YouTube, And the SEC's official whistleblower portal, she announced, her voice steady. We have 5 million concurrent viewers. Anything you do to us happens in front of the entire world. Do you really want to assault a whistleblower on camera? The guards hesitated. They looked at the phone, then at Arthur, and finally at the wall of press cameras that had suddenly swiveled away from the stage and toward Charlotte. The guards backed down. Charlotte lowered her arm but kept the phone live. She began to march down the center aisle, her boots thudding heavily against the plush carpet. Arthur Penhaligon is lying to you, she declared, locking eyes with the old man on stage. He isn't the savior of this company. He is the parasite that has been feeding on it for 20 years. She's hysterical, Arthur yelled, his voice cracking. He looked at the board members seated behind him, pleading. She's having a psychotic break. Someone get her off my stage. Paddy didn't speak. He broke off from Charlotte and sprinted toward the AV station in the center of the room. The terrified technician tried to block him, but Paddy shoved him aside with a desperate strength. Patching in now, Paddy muttered, jamming a cable into his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Bypassing the firewall. 3, 2, 1. On the massive projection screen behind Arthur, where a graph of projected stability had been displayed, the image flickered violently. The screen went black, then burst into life with a scrolling waterfall of data. These, Charlotte said, climbing the stairs to the stage. She stopped 10 feet from Arthur. Are the real books, the Ghost Protocol, every dirty dollar laundered through Meridian for the last 2 decades. The room erupted. Shareholders were standing up, shouting questions. Journalists were frantically typing, trying to keep up with the scrolling text. See those names? Charlotte pointed to the screen without looking away from Arthur. The cartels, the sanctioned regimes, and look at the beneficiary account. The screen froze on a single line item, a transfer of $400 million. Beneficiary, Penhaligon Trust, Isle of Man. Arthur froze. He looked at the screen, then back at Charlotte. His benevolent mask dissolved completely. His lips curled into a snarl, revealing the teeth of a cornered animal. You foolish girl, he hissed, stepping away from the podium so the microphone wouldn't catch him, but close enough for Charlotte to feel his spit. You think this matters? This is just data. I can claim it's forged. I own the judges. I own the politicians. I'll be out on bail by dinner, and you will be buried. Not this time, Arthur, Charlotte said softly. Paddy, play the audio. Paddy hit the enter key. Arthur's voice, clear and unmistakable, boomed over the ballroom's surround sound system. It was the recording from 20 minutes ago in the server room. I'm cutting the oxygen. Halon gas release in T-minus 60 seconds. It's a fire suppression measure. Very efficient. Leaves no biological residue. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a grave. 500 people held their breath. Attempted murder. There was no spinning this. There was no context that could explain away a premeditated gas execution. Arthur's face drained of color. He slumped, the fight leaving his body as if his strings had been cut. The double doors burst open again. This time, it wasn't a tactical team. It was a dozen agents in windbreakers, emblazoned with FBI and NYPD. Arthur Penhaligon, the lead agent shouted, moving swiftly up the aisle with handcuffs drawn. You are under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, and attempted murder. Arthur didn't fight. He straightened his tie with a trembling hand. As the agent spun him around and cuffed his wrists behind his back, he looked over his shoulder at Charlotte. There was no anger left, only a cold, hollow recognition. You learned too well, he whispered. I had a motivated teacher, she replied. As they dragged him away, the ballroom exploded into chaos. Shoutings, flashing lights, the roar of a corporate empire collapsing in real time. Charlotte stood in the center of the storm, unmoving. She felt a hand on her shoulder. We did it, Paddy said. He sounded stunned, his voice barely audible over the din. He's gone. Charlotte looked out at the sea of faces, the people who had doubted her, the people who had called her a gold digger, the people who had watched her walk away with one suitcase 5 years ago. She walked to the podium. She tapped the microphone once. The feedback screech silenced the room. "Meridian Holdings is dead," she announced. Her voice was tired, but it was steel. "The corruption goes to the bedrock. We cannot save this name, so we will not try." She looked at Paddy, then back to the crowd. "We will dissolve the board. We will liquidate the dirty assets and return the stolen funds to the pension holders, and from the ashes, we will build something new, something transparent, something real." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the last 5 years finally lift from her shoulders. "My name is Charlotte Keating, and I am just getting started." 6 months later, the autumn sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the converted warehouse in Brooklyn. The new headquarters of Phoenix and Company was nothing like the ivory tower of Meridian. There were no mahogany desks, no secret vaults, no hushed corridors of power. It was an open-plan space filled with light, the hum of conversation, and the energy of a fresh start. Charlotte sat at her desk, a simple glass table covered in blueprints for their new sustainable energy initiative. The IPO launch was oversubscribed by 400%. The market didn't just trust the numbers, they trusted her. A knock on her glass door broke her concentration. Paddy stood there. He looked healthy, the gauntness of his exile replaced by a runner's build. He wore dark jeans and a crisp button-down, sleeves rolled up. He was working as her chief strategy officer, on a probationary contract, with strict oversight and zero access to the financial controls. "The SEC finalized the settlement this morning," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Arthur got life without parole. The recording sealed it. His lawyers didn't even try to plea bargain." "Good," Charlotte said, not looking up from her tablet. "He earned every year." Paddy lingered. The silence stretched, filled with the unspoken history between them. "And my probation officer says my travel restrictions are lifted next month." He hesitated, shifting his weight. "I was thinking, maybe we could grab dinner. Real dinner, not at a diner. No talk of servers or subpoenas." Charlotte finally looked up. She studied him. She saw the man who had once been her entire world, then her tormentor, and finally her soldier in the trenches. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet humility she had never seen before. She smiled, but it was a professional smile, sharp, measured. "I have a board meeting in Tokyo next month, Paddy. Maybe when I get back." He nodded slowly, understanding the boundary. The power dynamic had shifted forever. He wasn't the sun anymore. He was just a planet in her orbit, and he was lucky to be there at all. "Right. When you get back." He turned to leave, his hand on the knob. "Paddy?" He turned back, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Good work on the algorithm." He smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Thanks, boss." Charlotte watched him walk away, disappearing into the bustling office floor. She turned her chair to look out the window at the Manhattan skyline across the East River. It looked different from here. Smaller. Manageable. She opened her top drawer. Inside, resting on a velvet lining, was the check Paddy had written her 5 years ago. The $50,000 she was supposed to use to disappear. She had taped the torn pieces back together, not to cash it, but to remember the moment she decided to fight. She took it out. She looked at the jagged tear marks one last time. She didn't need the reminder anymore. Charlotte Keating fed the check into the shredder by her desk. The machine whirred, slicing the last vestige of her old life into confetti. She didn't watch it fall. She picked up her pen and went back to work. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you execute the ultimate comeback. Charlotte didn't just survive, she rewrote the entire game. She went from a walk-away wife to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar empire, taking down the titans who tried to crush her. It's a reminder that your current situation is not your final destination. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. If you loved this story of betrayal, revenge, and redemption, please destroy that like button. Let's get this video to 10,000 likes, and tell me in the comments, if you were Charlotte, would you have hired Paddy back, or would you have left him in the dust? I read every comment. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, keep writing your own legend.